All right, in today's video, I'm going to be reacting to Tucker Carlson's views on cannabis, addiction, and addiction recovery in general, which he has some very staunch views on these topics. For those who don't know, Tucker Carlson used to struggle with alcoholism and other substances. So this is a fascinating interview. It's from the Joe Polish YouTube channel during interview for the Genius Network. And I put a link to the original content and the full-length interview, which I would really encourage you guys to watch if you're interested in Tucker Carlson or anything about this topic, in the pinned comment in the video description. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Hopefully I don't catch a copyright strike.
I ask you about that, but first I want to, we'll do some Q&A with the audience here in a little bit. Your alcoholism, you called yourself a functional alcoholism when you were drinking and partying and whatnot. Yeah. So what did you change? What was the light switch that?
Well, what I did was I stopped drinking, which I found super helpful.
What caused you to stop?
I mean, in my...
All joking aside, what Tucker Carlson's referencing is spontaneous recovery. And this is super important to take note of this for this interview. Spontaneous recovery, where the person just wakes up and quits drinking, quits smoking, quits snorting coke, whatever it is they're doing, is the number one way that people quit substances. It's not through AA, it's not through 12-step, it's not through Dr. Frank's addiction recovery coaching community, which I would highly recommend joining if you need help, link in the pinned comment. The number one way people stop is just they wake up one day and they stop on their own, and that's what he's referencing.
My case, yeah. I was sitting at my desk in my office smoking a Camel, I'll never forget it, which I also quit, unfortunately. Little short ones, flavored with chocolate, delicious cigarettes. I know no one's allowed to admit that, but they were amazing. And but I was sitting at my desk feeling hungover Sunday morning.
The first cigarette I ever smoked was a Camel. I was with my friends. We cut holes in garbage bags and we went underneath a bridge off of a bike path to go have cigarettes. And one of my dumbass friends brought cigars for himself because he didn't want to smoke cigarettes. And we smelled so bad between the cigars and the cigarettes. Naturally, I went home and got berated because, you know, I smelled like a cigar lounge.
Having a cigarette, and I just had this voice, which I think was from God, saying, you better quit. My wife was pregnant with our fourth child, and she was 10 days from giving birth. And I just had this voice tell me, you're going to lose everything if you don't stop drinking. And I believed it. You know, who knows why? I mean, I'm just ordinary person with a slightly above average IQ, not super insightful. Like, I have no idea what that was, but that happened to me and I followed it and I did it and it completely changed my life. And it's hard to talk about sobriety without sounding judgy or like one of those boorish rehab guys who's always lecturing you on all the steps or whatever. But the truth is, one of the main problems in this country is that everyone's loaded. Everyone's on some kind of drug or drunk. I mean, everyone's on pills. Like, I'm sorry, I don't want to judge anybody else, but like, everybody is on drugs. It's crazy. Everyone's on SSRIs or that weird, the meth they give you, but they call it Adderall, benzodiazepines. You know, I'm on a flight. I think I'll take some Xanax. What? It's insane. And I just am totally opposed to that. Weed, the number of fights I've gotten into, I used to smoke weed every day. I mean, I was like, I know a lot about weed. It makes you passive and stupid. I'm sorry. People get so mad if you say that. Oh, shut up. No, I've smoked more weed than you have.
Okay, two things real quick. Before he said that, you're going to notice he said, he says weed, and then he says, I've gotten into so many fights, and then he says it makes you passive and stupid. This is interesting. So a lot of people don't associate cannabis with violence, but I've spoken to a psychiatrist on the channel, and I've interviewed 2 other people regarding cannabis-induced psychosis. And people don't know this, but weed is heavily linked to violence and violent crime. And you can see that in states where they've had full recreational legalization. Here in the US, you can see that in those states. And a lot of people don't think of it that way. Pablo Escobar, one of the most violent criminals of his time, or maybe of all time, was known for just consuming cannabis, right? He didn't really dabble in alcohol. He didn't dabble in cocaine much. His thing was cannabis. And this dude was psychotic. I mean, blew up schools, blew up airplanes, all these innocent lives lost through his actions and stuff. People don't think of weed as a violent drug. And I think Tucker Carlson was getting into, I've gotten into so many fights I think he meant to say with weed, but then he kind of said it makes you passive and stupid, which, look, you guys know my points of view on weed. If you follow my channel long enough, you know that I feel it significantly damaged my career. It significantly damaged my overall intelligence during the time of active addiction, my finances, my relationships. And I agree with the passive part. I was so passive to ways that I was getting taken advantage of in my personal life and in my business life. And when I got sober, I was like, I had a lot of anger and a lot of aggression. And I think a lot of that was warranted because I didn't realize just how passive I had become in addiction and just the different ways that I was getting taken advantage of in life because of that. So, yeah.
It makes you into a loser. Are you joking? Why don't you just face your life? It's so awesome. And I never say this out loud because people really hate you when you do and feel judged. I'm in no position to judge anybody. I mean, I could blow your mind, actually, if I wanted to. I'm not going to. But I'm saying, like, I know a lot about this subject. So,
also on the weed community is like the most defensive community out there. Like, honestly, I never get attacked when I talk about alcohol, nicotine, maybe a little bit, this and that. And people love nicotine, right? Like skulls and very, very powerful brotherhoods behind those communities. The cannabis community is insane when it comes to the attacks and the backlash that they will give someone who speaks out against cannabis. It's mind-blowing to me. And I used to be part of that community. I used to really defend cannabis in a really, really strong way, right? And to some extent, I still talk positively when it comes to CBD and other cannabis products, not THC at all. But like, it is wild. That community is unhinged.
I think I have the authority to say this. It's like, it's such a thrill to be sober. It's not that hard, actually. And if you're not sober, you're never going to achieve the purpose for which you were created. That's just a fact. You're not. And it makes you weak. It's the last thing I'll say. It makes you weak. The more you party, the more you run away, the weaker you get, the more fearful you become. And the more you just face up to stuff. And I'm not even talking about drugs and alcohol. For men, I'm talking about like a grumpy wife. Like, there's nothing scarier than a pissed off wife, like, in the world. And if you run away from that and just go golfing and like, oh, she's crazy, you know, it doesn't get better. Like, man up and just like, tell me what's wrong. Just like sit through the first 3 minutes and then you find out what's wrong and it gets better. And you get stronger. She respects you for not golfing and for looking right into her eyes and listening to her complaints for a minute. It makes you stronger. When you run away and when you golf or you get high, or it makes you weak. And it's like a process. It's like the more you tell the truth, the more.
Yeah, I completely agree with this. I also think too, I know from my own experience with addiction, you know, you're smoking weed, you say I'm going to quit and you don't. You say I'm going to quit and you don't. And this happens over and over again. And this I think wears on a person subconsciously. I think it wears on their confidence. I know it did for me. And when you're not feeling confident, when you're not feeling like you're in congruence, when your actions are not congruent with the decisions that you're making or that you want to be making, this erosion of confidence, I think, leads to weakness, right? When we don't have a confident, strong person, when I talk to parents about kids and drug addiction and they're like, what do I need to do to help my kid? What do I need to do? And it's sad if they're older, but like if they're younger, I'm like, they need to be confident. They need to be confident in themselves. They need to be confident in themselves sober. They need to be confident in the decisions that they're making. They need to be confident. They need to be confident because they need to be strong in today's world. It's one of my biggest talking points, right? And when you got younger people, that confidence can only come from the parents, right? So that's a huge thing. It's even tougher if I have parents that don't have confidence, right? Because maybe of the environment they grew up in. But so that's one major way that I think it adds to weakness. And on the note of weakness too, operating out of fear, right? So many people in addiction, they operate just constantly out of fear-based. Fear of what's my life going to be like without this drug? Fear of how am I ever going to, you know, drive in the car without my vape? How am I going to face my wife if I'm not high? Or how am I going to, go out to dinner and socialize if I'm not high? And then there's the fear of withdrawals. I'm so scared to quit because I'm worried about the weed withdrawal or the nicotine withdrawal or the withdrawal, right? Like in theory, there's only, very limited withdrawal that you have to be worried about, right? Like benzo is one because it can kill you and alcohol withdrawal can kill you. But with a proper detox, medical detox, that's no problem. But it's like, it's a constant state of fear. And I agree that fear weakens a person.
Sober you are, the more you face things that make you afraid, the stronger you get. It's like life 101, but nobody feels free to say it. And the last thing I'll say, we should just go full Saudi on the drug thing. I mean it, like full freaking Saudi. One of the benefits of traveling a lot is you go to countries where they just don't put up with it. We're like, oh, you're so uncool. Like, you don't allow me to bring a joint to your country? You know what? Just cut your hands off if you do that. Because we're not. Try to do that in Japan. Actually, try to do that in Japan. You go to Singapore, you live in Singapore, they drug test you at the airport. If you're a Singaporean citizen. And if you fail the drug test, like if you smoke weed, you go to rehab for 6 months. They don't tell anyone where you are. You just disappear. You go to rehab. That's a true fact. I just had dinner 2 nights ago with someone whose friend showed up at the airport in Singapore, flying home, got drug tested, got sent to rehab for 6 months. He was engaged. His fiance left him and married somebody else.
Wow.
Hilarious. It's a pretty big.
So this is all I'll say on that. Well, I will comment more in a minute, but like to that guy who lost his wife over this for getting drug tested at the airport, people don't realize the ways that drug use is going to impact their lives. If you're regularly smoking weed, drinking alcohol, doing things, people don't even begin to understand the ways that substance use has the potential to impact their future and the outcomes of their future. Like, no idea. People think they hit a rock bottom, and then there's just another trapdoor and another trapdoor. I say, weed doesn't lead to higher highs; it just leads to lower lows, and that's true of any substance use, in my opinion.
Deterrent to getting wasted, actually, it turns out. Yeah, that's harsh. Okay. But compared to what? Watching people die of fentanyl ODs on the sidewalk? Have you been to our cities recently? It's totally cruel and inhumane and disgusting and beneath us as a nation to allow people to OD on drugs on the sidewalk. There's no kindness in that at all. It's cruel. You hate people if you allow that. Would you allow your children to do that? No, you'd chain them to the freaking radiator till they sobered up because you love them. When you hate people, you let them OD on drugs. And we're letting the whole country do that.
So, okay, hold on.
And encouraging them to do drugs, sending crack pipes to crack addicts, giving weed to kids. Are you joking? I just lock them up, man. I mean, and I'll be totally blunt. As a former drug user, I'm saying that. And I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. I hope we just get full Saudi on those people, including the policymakers who allowed it, because they've killed so many people. They deserve to be punished in a very severe way.
So, okay. That's a lot. Where do we start to unpack that? Okay. He's talking from a perspective of, he says, just kind of, chain your kid to a radiator until they detox. Okay. This is interesting from Tucker Carlson's perspective, someone who found spontaneous recovery, someone who just became recovered. They said, I'm done drinking, and they just stopped. Because that's for a lot of people, that's not how it goes. And I know that he is aware of that. Okay. I'm fully aware that he's aware of that. But I just and I know he's somewhat kidding, but I also don't think he is. That's not going to be the solution, right? Like, that's just not going to work. I've talked to parents who have tried that, right? I understand the appeal to trying that, but that's ultimately not going to work. And we could see that in prisons too, right? Like, people go to prison, some people detox and they come out and they're doing great and they don't do drugs again. Some people go to prison, they're locked up, they have more access to drugs in jail than they've ever had, or maybe they're in the jail where they don't. And they come out of jail and they're right back to using drugs. And by the way, there's a lot of prisons nowadays that prescribe legal drugs, so the prisoner is just able to get high all day long. Anyways, I'm getting off topic here, but so that's my first thing. I don't think that's necessarily the right approach to go down.
So yeah, it's interesting.
How's that for unpopular?
No. It's like it's a
bring back the war on drugs, but this time we're not joking.
Yeah, well, see,
which, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure under Trump's presidency, he did declare like outright war against the cartels. And a large reason for that is for the drug influx that, is alluded to the cartels bringing in. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out. The first war on drugs was an abysmal failure. I know Tucker Carlson would be well aware of that. That's why he's saying, but this time we're serious. We'll see what happens, because I do think Trump is fairly serious against the war on drugs, and we'll see how that plays out, I suppose.
I think the war on drugs was, I believe addiction is a solution to pain. So the drugs, the alcohol, the sex, the gambling, the workaholism, all the pursuits of the dopamine pursuit is because of either one, you're just pursuing this feeling you want, or trauma and things like that. And I have mixed feelings about, like, for instance, there's 25% of the world's prisoners are in the United States.
So I never like the description of addiction as a solution to the pain. And I don't like the word addiction and solution ever being used in the same sentence. And I'll explain why. Because if we view addiction as a solution to anything, or even perceive it to be a solution to anything, we're giving the addiction a benefit. And when we go into addiction and we feel it has benefits, it's going to make it very, very hard for that person to stop. Because why would I stop something that is benefiting me? So I like to describe addiction as a distraction from the pain. The pain could be financial pain, emotional pain, trauma, spiritual pain, whatever it is the person's trying to deal with. And I'll put it this way. Let's say you broke your leg, and that broken leg represents the trauma in your life or the pain that you've been dealing with in life, okay? And now addiction is like putting your hand on a burning hot stove to distract yourself from the pain that you have from the broken leg, okay? Which in some cases, that burning hot stove pain might be welcomed if you've been dealing with this ongoing broken leg pain for a long time, but it's not a solution. It's a distraction from it. And I think it's so important that we word it that way, because now we're not giving the person who's in active addiction a benefit to the drug use. Because I know for me, if I saw any benefit in the drug, it was continued use, keep smoking weed, keep smoking weed, keep smoking weed, right? It wasn't until I really acknowledged, like, there's no more benefits in this, that quitting eventually became easier. So
States, we're the highest incarcerating country in the world. And there's 2.2 million people incarcerated in the US. And the majority of people that commit crimes are under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And 40% of people incarcerated are committed a violent crime. The other 60% have not. So a lot of these people are addicts. And so it's one of these things where I take a compassionate approach. And at the same time, Portugal, I'm curious where they're at now, because, like, all I can go off of is really from several years ago. I don't know how well they've weathered through the pandemic, and I haven't stayed up to date on it. But what they did is they legalized drugs, but the money they were spending on enforcement went into treatment, and it cut the addiction rate in half. Almost all violent crimes went down. But when you just make,
I don't know. I've spent a lot of time in Portugal. I don't think that's an accurate representation. And I would say, I know.
Okay, so we got to talk about that a little bit. So two things we actually have to talk about here. One, on the Portugal thing, you cannot take other countries and compare them to the United States of America. Our hustle culture, our mental health, our political environments here in the U.S. Are very, very different from other places around the world, right? So, like, I've traveled to Italy and stuff, and other places where you'll see more moderate substance use, right? And I've been places where, like, they still shut down their work. The businesses will shut down during the afternoon so everyone can take a nap, right? You still have very traditional, strong family values in a lot of these other countries. We don't have that here in America. So the idea of just legalize all these drugs and it's going to work out the same way it worked out in Portugal, or it worked out where else are all the drugs legal? Is it like Sweden or somewhere? There's another place that people like to quote for full legalization and say, like, look, it's going really well for them. It's going well for them because that is a different country, that is a different environment, that is a different mindset. And because of that different environment, mindset, culture, moderation is a lot more attainable. Here in the US, we are not a place of moderation. We're in a mental health crisis 24/7, political crisis 24/7. There's no break, right? Family structure has been destroyed. So to say legalize all drugs here, I think that it's going to play out how it played out in these other countries is inaccurate. You cannot do that, and you can prove that. You can look at states where they've had full legalization of cannabis, full legalization of substances in general. Crime is up, illegal drug use is up, right? Suicide rate is up, right? Violent crime is up. And so when you take the US and you apply this model to certain cities, it's not having a good outcome at all. And this is public literature out there. So that's the one thing. Now, so then you say, well, what about Tucker's thing of should we go Saudi Arabia style? I don't have an opinion on that, but I find that an interesting opinion of Tucker's, because Tucker Carlson is someone who's very big on freedom of like choice. Okay, like an American should be able to make their own decisions. Okay, I'm not talking about abortion here or anything, and he's really big on like freedom. And nicotine, he's vocal about this with nicotine. He was in Australia recently laughing about how the Australian government wants to make nicotine by prescription only. And he was like, that's ridiculous. Let the people have their nicotine, blah, blah, blah. So if you were to apply Tucker Carlson's idea of Saudi Arabia and just get rid of all the drugs, like where do you draw the line? So like, do you get rid of nicotine then? Do you get rid of caffeine? I would assume gambling, adult media content, all that stuff has to go. What about video games, right? Like, where do you draw the line between what drugs you're getting rid of and what drugs you're not getting rid of? Okay, how do you make that decision? Because I'm sure if our government decided to go full on Saudi Arabia and they said, fine, we're taking away nicotine, Tucker Carlson would very quickly change his views, especially with the recent launch of his ELP nicotine pouches, which I would love to interview him about one day.
A number of people, more than 2, who got off heroin in jail, and who look back on their incarceration as a blessing. I mean, addiction, I think you have experience with it. I certainly do. They're crazy. You're not in your right mind when you're addicted to something. You're totally crazy. You're like a trapped animal. You'll do anything. And
oh yeah, absolutely.
People like that, our record on drug treatment in the United States is like a joke. It's abysmal.
It's horrible.
It's just abysmal. Mm-hmm. It's made a lot of money for the drug treatment centers. Everyone's like, treatment. Well, show me a treatment center with like an over 50%.
It doesn't exist.
Success rate over 5 years. I've never heard of one. Maybe there is one. I'd love to know. We should replicate it everywhere. The only thing I've ever seen that works is AA, and that's because it's based in.
So let me pause here. So how we treat drugs in the United States is a disaster. Most treatment centers, and this is what I don't think Tucker Carlson is aware of at all, because he found spontaneous recovery. Okay, AA is the root of most treatment centers in the United States. Most sober livings, most treatment centers are rooted in the 12-step philosophy. And right here, he's saying he feels that works. Tucker Carlson did not quit drinking with AA. He had never even been to an AA meeting until he was done drinking. And that one guy on YouTube, the celebrity guy that does a lot of politics and addiction recovery stuff on YouTube, brought him to an AA meeting once, okay? And like Tucker Carlson had a good time. He enjoyed the people that he met at AA. It wasn't the meeting himself, but Tucker made it very clear that he enjoyed the human interaction and the people that he was connecting with there. AA is literally a large portion of what's responsible for our abysmal drug treatment outcomes. And again, it's adopted by a majority of sober livings and treatment centers, which are a very dark place in many, many cases, okay? The regulations on them are odd. They're all run very, very differently. How you run a detox is different from a treatment center, is different from a sober living. It is so profit-driven, the amount of insurance frauds, body brokering that occurs in these places. You go to a sober living, the guy owns the sober living. He also owns a landscaping company, a roofing company, and a cleaning business for women. And suddenly these people who had these drug addictions feel indebted to the person at the sober living. So he's like, great, well, you might as well work for me then if you're indebted to me. I'll give you a job cleaning houses or roofing or whatever, even though these people might have been qualified for something better than that. And I'm not saying those are bad jobs by any means. I'm just saying this is very common in that space. Okay. There's an incredible book on this called The Freedom Model, Escaping the Addiction Recovery Trap. Read that book. It's very evidence-based. Not only does it go into the dark side of all this stuff about addiction recovery and why we're in such a failing place, but it also does a great job of giving you practical ways to quit substances. And the most practical way is quitting on your own. And look, people will throw stones and say, well, Dr. Frank, you're encouraging me to join your Addiction Mindset school community for $27 a month, which you guys should join for $27 a month, link in the pinned comment, or to take your supplements designed to help people quit. Chewing gum that's nicotine-free and caffeine-free, designed to help people quit, link in the pinned comment. aren't you doing the same thing? No, I'm really not. And I could go into a whole nother video. Before someone signs up in our one-on-one coaching with me, I have an entire page that tells them not to sign up for the one-on-one coaching with me, giving them data and statistics and proof that they can just do this on their own. Okay. Like I deter people from doing that with me. Okay. Now, the supplements I am a huge fan of for other reasons too, because of the ingredients and things like that outside of addiction recovery. But I'm getting off track. But listen, these treatment centers, addiction is a massive business and everyone wants in on it. Real estate people want in on it. Doctors want in on it. Addiction recovery people want in on it. Government agencies want in on it. There is so much money being moved around in the addiction space. It is so rapidly growing. There's blood in the water. Right? There are people bleeding. There are vulnerable people bleeding in active addiction, and the sharks are coming out to clean up that blood. Okay. And that's a message. That's a warning to you. If you're struggling, that's a warning to me. And it's not to scare you away from treatment. It's just to tell you the reality of what is going on in this space. And all you got to do is Google the growing business of addiction treatment and sober livings and stuff like that. Right. I was on school.com and there's a program in there and it's called From Like Rags to Riches, Running Profitable Sober Livings. It's just like basically how to maximize profits in sober livings, which I understand every business needs a profit. My YouTube channel has to profit off something or this space doesn't exist. But like I tell you, what goes on in the addiction space is wild and disgusting. So, okay.
Like the core truth of life, which is you have to admit that you have no power to solve your problems. And if you don't, then you're just lying to yourself. So I think that works, but you know, whatever, opinions differ, but let's just apply science to it. Like, where's the treatment center?
AA doesn't work. There's no science behind AA. That's a fact. AA is faith-based, which I'm a man of faith. I'm a big fan of faith and having faith. But like from an evidence-based standpoint, AA is done an abysmal job. The treatment centers are a direct reflection of that. And he's literally about to state that right now. Like he's literally about to contradict exactly what he's saying. Okay.
With like an 80% success rate.
Not there.
Where's one with an 18% success rate? I just don't know of any.
The only ones that really have really great success rates are long-term, 6 months, a year, 2 years, like Vulcan Academy, this individual, they literally have people, mostly, young adults that check in for like 2 years and they have a incredible thing, but it's a long time, right? And then I can't remember the name of it, but in Italy, this is one of Bobby Kennedy's favorite models of recovery, where they have these very long-term, put them in nature, put them around different environments, and connect them.
That definitely is good.
Yeah.
But I guess I would also just say,
so like, we're talking about treatments and treatment centers and what works. What works is spontaneous recovery. That's been proven again and again and again, right? The person just needs a little bit of guidance, a flip in mindset. Some people, when we talk about benzos, alcohol, some opioids, they may need medical detox, but like the treatment that works is the person getting better on their own. That is the treatment that ultimately works. Okay. And the reality is some people won't. Some people are just going to die. Everyone has to die one day, and some people are going to die of drugs. We will not be able to save everyone. Okay. That's the harsh reality of this. Now, so it drives me nuts too. When we talk about a long-term, like a year or 2 years, I do agree with that. I think that's good. But like, what happens after the person's been removed from their family environment, their work environment for a year, and now you put them back into that environment? If I'm in a treatment center where I'm outside in nature and I'm doing all this stuff, but I'm not living in my own reality, I don't know how that's going to work once that person reintegrates into their reality, because that's not reality for a lot of people. So I think we have to. I just don't know about that. I find the people that have the most success are the people who get the minimal amount of help that most people need. Most people don't need treatment. We're treating something that most people don't need treatment for. And by doing so, we're making it worse. And I'm not talking about medical detox. I'm talking about rehabs and 12-step programs and things like that. People need medical detox. If you need that, go and get that. Okay. But most people don't need it. And just this messaging of it is it's literally making things worse. So, okay.
I left something out. I'm so mad about the drug thing that I'm sorry I endorsed the Saudi drug program, though I meant it. But I do think we should spend a lot more time on the other side of the question, which is endorsing sobriety.
Yeah.
It is so awesome to be clear-eyed and sober. As much as it doesn't solve all your problems, you're still the lumpy loser you were when you were drunk. But it begins the process of healing your soul, and there's so much joy in sobriety. No one ever endorses it.
Oh yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, life is better when you're loaded, but that's just a lie. It's a full-blown lie, and no one ever calls them on that. And I hope, I mean, Trump is sober, Bobby's sober. I've been to meetings with Bobby, and I hope that people now in positions of authority who are on television all the time will just tell their own stories more often and just say, I'm so glad to be sober. It's so great, because it is.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll tell you, the drugs that kill people are legal, and the drugs that save people's lives, like the ibogaines and certain plant medicines, are illegal. And so the whole thing is just lopsided. And part of the challenge is, one of the initiatives we have with Genius Recovery is we want to save 20,000 lives a year of the 100,000 plus people that are dying from opiate addictions. And so
Well, how many people die of Xanax ODs?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So that's what I'd like to know. That's a legal product that like every woman in America has in her medicine cabinet. Every kid has it too, college campus. I mean, how many, if you've got kids in college, how many of your kids' friends have to go to treatment to get off benzos? How many people die every year from benzos and alcohol? Many thousands. How many people die from withdrawal from benzos? A lot. And those are legal. And psychiatrists prescribe them without thinking through the consequences, and there's no sanction. And those psychiatrists should be criminally charged, in my opinion. That's crazy. The Sacklers paid $1 billion fine for sending, opioids throughout Appalachia, but psychiatrists who hand out benzos, which are deadly and physically addictive, we're just like, oh no, that's medicine. It's not medicine. It's totally wrong. And at some point, like, we need to call out people on the individual level. If you are a psychiatrist who's handing Adderall to children and benzos to their moms without any thought to the addiction and suffering and brain damage that results from those drugs, then you should lose your medical license at least.
Yeah, absolutely. No.
Yeah. So I work in the schools. I work with a lot of young kids. And, the saddest thing is you have a kid that's smoking a bunch of weed, using a bunch of nicotine, abusing energy drinks on social media for 20 of the 24 hours in a day. And they're dealing with anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and their parents want to help them. So the parents take them to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist says, well, you got ADHD, you got insomnia because you're up all night on your phone, you can't sleep, and you got depression and whatever. So that's exactly what happens. They give them ADHD meds, they give them a low dose benzo, they give them some other medications, whatever. And now this kid is arguably, and they don't tell him to stop smoking weed, or they don't address the social media issues or any of that. They just load up all these medications, and now the kid gets worse. They start spiraling faster than they were before. Right. And then they're like, well, they go back to the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist is like, well, now you're dealing with addiction, right? Now you got this benzo addiction. And I don't know, maybe you're even addicted to weed. I didn't think you were. I thought your smoking was a good idea. Maybe I was wrong. They would never admit that. And now they're like, we got to send you to a treatment facility. So they send them to a 12-step based treatment facility. That fails. And now the parents just feel hopeless. And all they were trying to do was take their kids to the doctor to get some help. And it wound up causing a lot more harm than good. And the goal in medicine was do no harm, right? That's kind of the oath that you're supposed to take. And we've gotten so far away from that, particularly in what Tucker Carlson is talking about. The prescription of these legal drugs that are responsible for killing so many people, so many pointless deaths. I'm not saying the person was pointless. I'm saying their death was so avoidable. So many avoidable deaths have occurred because of this, and it's actually disgusting and sickening. And I see where Tucker Carlson is passionate about speaking about that. So check this full interview out on the Joe Polish YouTube channel. Okay. If you want links to our programs and our resources to help you quit, we have a free 90-page workbook. You can download that in the PDF documents below. Read the book, The Freedom Model. Read the book, Rational Recovery. Read the book, Dopamine Nation. If you read those 3 books, I'll link them in the video description. Okay. The link's in the video description to this video. You will have every tool and every mindset you need to quit. The only thing after that would have to be is to decide if you need to do a medical detox or not. Okay. Which is no big deal to get someone set up with that if they need help with that. Okay. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this interview. I hope you enjoyed my reaction to it. Until next time.